New episode of Ready to Write. If this is the first time you're watching this video, just a little reminder, these are short and sweet episodes between now and the end of October, with the focus being helping you get ready to write. And actually, hopefully, somewhere along the way, you might actually do some writing as well. We have some tricks and some tips and some mind gymnastics to help you get over yourself. Not just you, we all do this. And so with that reminder as well, if you've not seen the previous episodes, there are a few. Depending on where you're watching this, there'll be a playlist that makes it easy to watch this. Oh, and a quick housekeeping reminder as well. If you don't get the daily love notes, so if you haven't signed up and joined the Youier movement, do that, because what I'm going to do is on the weekend, in the weekend wrap email, I'm going to be sending out a list of links where you can see all the previous episodes as well. So if you've missed any, like I say, I don't want anyone to play catch up. So you are where you need to be. And at the same time, if there's some episode titles that spark your interest, it'll be easy to go back and watch those. Like I say, they're not long, they're short, sweet and actionable. With that reminder, if you haven't done your play thing, keep doing it. Play along with us, because it is great fun when you do that, and it will help you as well. Good morning, Acelia. Hello. I don't very often have people live all of the time because it's so early in the morning. Although that reminds me. I don't know if you know Cynthia, but she knows you. But I don't know that you've two spoken, but she's in South Africa too. I think she said near Cape Town. So consider yourselves introduced and talk to each other, because I think you've got lots in common and you're both brilliant. So that's my little sort of connecting piece. With all of that said, I'm going to get cracking with today's episode. Housekeeping reminder for you, Celia, because you're the only one here live at the moment. I'm going to ignore you for a moment while I record the main part of the episode, because this goes to the podcast as well, so it keeps it nice and neat. And then we can then, if there's any questions, comments, observations, we can do those at the end. So that said, today's episode is called "What's Your Story?" Or, what's the story you're answering? I had to check my notes then. So those of you who are in the Blue House and who've been doing the Youier games, this will sound very familiar, because we actually explored this in game 4 on Tuesday. Now, it's funny how things work out. So some of you will know, the Youier games was announced all the way back in June. We started it in September. I had no idea when we started the Youier games that we would be doing this Ready to Write series. And so I sat with Holy Spirit when he gave me the idea, and I said, okay, what are we doing each day? So I have a list of little topics to keep us on track each day. And it just so happens that this week we are talking about story questions. And so for those of you in the Blue House, it does actually give you an extra layer of reminders, and you're coming to this already slightly primed, which gives you an advantage. Which also reminds me of, as well, if there's anybody who's watching or listening along who's not a member of the Blue House and you'd like to be, you can come and join us in the Blue House, get access to the Rainbow Room, which for the purposes of writing is particularly useful because it is our small group coaching experience inside the Blue House, focused on helping you plan, write, publish and market your book. So as we go along, if you find that you would like that within community, you can do that. It costs £45 a month at the time of recording, which I think is about $50, $55 US, depending on the exchange rate. The pound is not doing terribly strongly against the dollar at the moment, so it'll be a little bit cheaper for you. But the Rainbow Room is included in that, and so we get together on Zoom every week. To find out more about that, go to youier.com/Rainbow Room. There's a video there. But of course, if you have any questions, you can ask them. Comment wherever you're watching this video. So today, though, story, what are we talking about? This is not actually talking about what's your story in terms of the actual story you're writing. So you remember on Monday, we actually did say, what's your story? We were talking about the stories you're telling yourself around the writing process. This is not that, although that's very valuable. And if you didn't go through that, I would encourage you to do so. This is about your book. Now we're going to, for the purposes of today's episode, we are going to assume that you are writing a book. You can, however, remember I told you, don't get hung up on the publishing platform. If you're doing this in order to help you get writing blog posts, this works too, because even on something, obviously a blog post is shorter than a book, but still you want to have a level of clarity even within one blog post. Some of you know that I write a monthly blog post for the Good Christian blog, and every time I do that, we're given an overarching theme. There's a collection of writers, and we're given an overarching theme. And within that theme, okay, Holy Spirit, What am I focusing on? Because without that focus, it's really hard to know what to write. And you can find yourself going off on many, many wonderful adventures, particularly if your mind is wired a little bit like mine is. I know some other people with joining us and within the Blue House, we are a little bit ADHD inclined, which I'm going to tell you is a gift. I know that it means that we can get distracted very easily. We're like, oh, shiny, there's all this classic stuff. And yes, it can be a challenge, but I want to remind you that actually your mind is a gift. So no matter how your mind is wired, it is not an accident. It is on purpose. And there is absolutely a gift inside of that. And one of the beautiful gifts of having a mind that does come up with ideas and sees possibility everywhere is just that, seeing possibility everywhere. And then it's simply about, using the tools that God gave us to actually, okay, of all of these wonderful ideas, where are we going first? What's the focus right now? Which brings us back into this idea of, your story question. And so folks in the Blue House on Tuesday will have heard me give you a couple of examples. We use the example of the film Miracle on 34th Street. Yes, there are lots of things happening in that film, but what is the overarching question that film answers? Excuse me. And the overarching question that film answers is Santa real? I mean, you might not agree, you might think this asks other questions, but that in essence is the question I believe that Miracle on 34th Street answers. Is Santa real? My other example I gave on Tuesday is one of my favourite films. It's called About Time. It's a time-travelling adventure. The guy called Tim, the year he turns 21, he discovers that the men in his family can travel through time. Now, you'd think that the story question for this film would all be about something to do with time travel. Actually, the question that film answers is, how can I find love? Because that in essence is what Tim does throughout the film, is he finds love through his many time-travelling adventures. Those are just two examples for you, but let's take this back to books. And so I'm going to give you an example of one of my books. And again, Blue House members, you heard this on Tuesday. The Itchy Soul is a fiction novel that I wrote back in 2016, 2017. And from my perspective as the person who wrote it, the question that story answers is, how can I find happiness in my mundane, ordinary life? Now, you might read that book and go, actually, I think it answers this question, or I think it answers that question. That's absolutely fine. There's no problem with that. I'm not here to tell you that there's only one question being answered. What I want you to think about within the context of what you're writing is, what question does your book answer? Another way of looking at this is, what problem is your book solving? Now, this idea of approaching it from a problem is particularly useful if you're thinking about writing non-fiction. Because if you're anything like a lot of people that I speak to, they have ideas for so many books, and then maybe their business is focused on a particular thing, but even within that topic, let's use the topic Youier. Whilst Youier is you, an intentional expectant relationship, there are many different books that you could use to focus in on all of that. So what do you do? How do you take all of those ideas? Think of it as, what is the story question or the problem that this first book is going to solve? As you approach your writing, you are not writing the one book to rule them all. You are writing your first book. I would suspect there are a number of books inside of you, particularly if you're somebody, if God's been niggling you around something, if there's a message that's yours to share with the world, you will have many books inside of you. And don't let that idea overwhelm you. Just focus on this first book. But what is the story question or the problem that this book is answering? And so I'm looking across on my shelf now. Actually, I can't see my shelf very well because it's angled poorly. I was going to give you some examples from books. I can see one over there. There's a book. I can't read her surname. There's a lady called Amy. I helped her with the Kindle version of her book, a number of years ago. And she's got a business called Content 10X. And the question that her book answers is, how can I take one piece of content and use it to create content for many different social media platforms? And that's what her book, in essence, walks the reader through. Use that as an example. Another book example that comes to mind is a book called Write, Publish, Repeat, which is, how can I build a sustainable author business, if you like. I'm not sure if that's quite the right word. And so what their argument is, you write your first book, you publish it, you do it again. In essence, keep on publishing. And yes, there's stuff to do behind the scenes. So those are just a couple of examples from books off the top of my head. But your plaything is to explore this. What's your book? What is the story question that your book is going to answer? Or what is the problem that your book is going to solve? Now, tomorrow, we're going to be getting practical. We're going to be actually helping you, if you've already started writing a bit, something that you can do, one really clever little trick that you can use with your mind to make it really easy for you to get writing the next day. But the reason we've done this groundwork first is because getting these pieces down before you even start writing will make it easier for you to stay focused. It'll make it easier as well. When you get different ideas that come in, you can go, okay, is this idea for this book? Well, does it help answer this question? If it does not help answer that question, then no, park it. I'm not saying that the idea is no good. You write it somewhere, keep it. That might be for your next book. And even as you're planning your book and you have all of these ideas, and you might, depending on how you like to plan, you might have a mind map or a list or whatever that looks like. As you get all of those ideas down, you go through each idea. Does this help answer this question? Yes, brilliant. It could be in this book. Does this help answer? Yes. Does this help? No. Put it over to one side. That's the power of knowing the question that your book is going to be answering, or the problem that your book is going to be solving. Yes, it does mean you're going to need to say no to some of your beautiful ideas, but you're not saying no to them forever. You're saying no to them for this book, and you capture them, record them somewhere, and keep them for another time. I'll give you a real life example of this. I found in one of my notebooks from 2018 an idea that I think is going to be what we're going to be playing with on a Tuesday afternoon in January in 2023 inside the Blue House. I'm not going to tell any more about that now because I need to explore it more with Holy Spirit. But it's an idea I had in 2018 which I captured, didn't really do anything with. And here we are, 2023, well, that's 5 years later. Actually, that idea is something that we can use and explore in a positive way. So again, another quick example for you, but that's your plaything. I'm realizing that we're slightly over the 10 minutes that I was aiming to keep to for these episodes. But hopefully you can stick along with this. Those ideas will help you. If you do get stuck with this, if you're not quite sure, if you're in the Blue House, you can post inside the Blue House and say, I'm not sure. You can use other words too, obviously. If you're not a member of the Blue House, I would encourage you to comment wherever you're watching the video. If you're listening to this on the podcast, come on over to the Telegram channel and join in the conversation there instead. You've got a number of different options depending on where you are. Obviously, the Blue House is my favourite option because I'm biased. I love it there. The folks inside there, they make my heart sing every time I get to interact with them. So yes, I make no apologies for the fact that you will hear me reminding you to do that. But if you're not yet ready to come and join us, or it's not for you, don't worry, we've still got you supported. Speaking of support as well, if there is somebody who has been talking about writing a little bit, particularly if it's somebody who, like me back in 2015, kept putting it on their list every single December into January, this will be the year I write a book, this will be the year I write a story, this will be the year. Would you share these videos with them, please? Because this is who my heart is for in this, because I recognise what it feels like to keep on saying it. And actually, you can do this. You're absolutely, completely capable of doing this. It does not need to be overwhelming. We are living in a glorious age where anybody can publish a book. And I fully maintain Amazon is like one great big search engine. So if you're somebody who is, running a business or a non-profit or a ministry, you want to be on Amazon because it gives you credibility, but also when people search for your topic, we want them to find your book. So that you're going to hear me bang on about this a lot, in a good way, hopefully not in a boring way, but it is important to me, and it is part of the reason why we're doing this series, is to actually help you get there and do this and give you the confidence to know that you can absolutely do it. So that's a wrap for this episode for today. Go and do your plaything. We'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow is our final episode for this week. Podcast listeners, actually, we're going to release these over the weekend because of the tech aspect behind the scenes. So if you're listening on the podcast, you might get an episode tomorrow and the day after that. I'm just saying. But for those of us watching this on YouTube and Facebook, we'll have one more episode tomorrow and then you have a little break for the weekend. Thank you for being here. Kimberly, hello. I wasn't ignoring you. I was trying to give myself not too much of a headache in terms of editing later on. Shouldn't you not be asleep? That's a very poorly constructed sentence. It's like 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. It's the wee small hours of this morning for you. Wow. Okay, well, hopefully now you've watched this, you can, hopefully you're not, if I watched this and I was excited about writing, I'd then find it really hard to sleep. I'm hoping and trusting that does not happen to you, Kimberly. Instead, you've listened to this, you can go to sleep now going, yes. With that reminder, Kimberly, we're in the Blue House on Zoom on Tuesday doing the Youier games. You've saved me emailing you now because you're here instead. You know I don't like the word should. But in this instance, yes, you ought to be asleep because it is the middle of the night. However, I'm hoping and trusting that you can have a lie-in tomorrow morning instead and make it all good. Go to sleep. Have a wonderful, restful sleep. Sweet dreams to you. Everybody else who's catching up with this later, good morning. I should catch up with you soon. But thank you for joining me live. I do appreciate it, Kimberly and Acelia. And everybody else, thank you for watching the replays. That's much appreciated too. Have a good day.